And thank you for being here at Three Creeks Church this morning. Happy Easter. And my name is Joel, and I get to be the pastor here at Three Creeks. And the video that you saw just before we sung that song is maybe a modern day depiction of a story that Jesus told called the Prodigal Son. Perhaps you're familiar with it. To a lot of people, that's who Jesus was. They knew him as storyteller Jesus. They would find themselves in a room and oftentimes with some religious people that were trying to ask him hard questions and trap him, and he wouldn't always answer their questions like they wanted. Sometimes he would just sit back and he would just tell stories. And so some people knew him as storyteller Jesus. It's not the only reputation that he had. Some people thought that he was an aspiring politician. Some people thought he was a prophet from God. Some people thought he was a kind of a traveling magician who was able to pull off tricks in front of people. A lot of people thought he was going to be an army commander, going to raise up an army and overthrow the Roman Empire. That's what they thought he was going to do. But the bottom line is, no matter how you slice it, Jesus was a threat to powerful people. And so powerful people, they killed him. They figured out a way. They got some witnesses. They stirred up the crowd, and they had Jesus executed. It's a true historical fact that this happened. And what's interesting is that he was killed on a Friday, but on Sunday, rumors began to circulate that the tomb that they had put Jesus' body in, that the stone had been rolled away and that the body was missing. That somebody had I don't know, took it, or some of Jesus' followers began to say, no, nobody took it. Jesus is alive again. We've seen him. We've seen him with our own eyes. And it says in the Bible that over 500 people were eyewitnesses to a resurrected Jesus. A Jesus who was alive again. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but so there's 11 disciples left, right? There were 12 for a while, and Judas betrays Jesus. And of the 11 that were left, 10 of them were tortured and killed, and one of them was exiled. So all 11 went to their death claiming that Jesus Christ had risen from the dead. And it's true, I think you'll agree, that somebody will die for a belief that they have that isn't true. But nobody dies for a belief that they have that they know isn't true. One of them would have broke. They all would have broke. But these 11 disciples and 500 other people said, no way. We saw him. He ate food with us. It was not, I didn't have a dream. We saw him alive again. And if you really think about that, if you stop and think about that for a minute, it is pretty remarkable. It's not something that you can just pass off because somebody was killed and then he came back to life. And that has to be dealt with at some point in everybody's life. So back to storyteller Jesus. He would get in a room. He was an amazing storyteller. A lot of the stories he told, they weren't necessarily true stories, but they had truth in them. And people that were listening would always be able to find themselves in the story. That's how Jesus told these stories, these parables, if you will. And I want to just walk us through my favorite one. It's the story of the prodigal son. It's in Luke chapter 15. We'll throw the verses up on the screen behind me. And if you have a Bible or your phone, you can turn there. And if you don't own a Bible, if that is not something that you have as yours, there's a huge stack. I can actually see them right now on the table right there. And on your way out today, you should grab one and take a permanent marker and write your name on it because it's yours. It's our gift to you, something that we'd love to give you. Luke chapter 15, here's my plan. I just want to walk through kind of the first half of this story. And I want to maybe highlight some stuff that you might not have noticed before. It's things that I learned as I studied this. And at the end, I just want to ask you a couple questions. Luke chapter 15, starting in verse 11. Jesus told him a story. A man had two sons. The younger son told his father, I want my share of your estate now before you die. 2 verses in, this story is already inconceivable to the people that are listening to it, because the younger son would never do this. The younger son would never ask for his inheritance in advance. This is grounds for excommunication. He's risking his whole inheritance just on asking this question. And in this day and age, the oldest son would get 2/3 of the inheritance, and then the younger son in this case would get 1/3 of the inheritance. And so what the son is asking is, he's going, can I have my piece of the pie right now? And so in other words, he's essentially looking at his dad and saying, I wish you were dead. I wish you would just keel over and die, because I want what is coming my way, and I want it right now. And the listeners of this story would be going, no son does this. But the next line would have surprised them perhaps even more. It says, so his father agreed to divide his wealth between the sons. And the listeners would be saying, no. Why would a father who is built up, why would he trade, sell his land and sell his livestock and sell his identity for this greedy and foolish and young son? This is such an insult to the father. The fact that he would do it is insane. But now, of course, as the people are listening, they're like, how's this going to play out? They want to know what happens next. So a few days later, this younger son packed all of his belongings and moved to a distant land. And there he wasted all his money in wild living. Wild living, the original word that describes wild living in the Greek is a word that we get the word prodigal from. It means wasteful or reckless. In this story that Jesus tells, it says that this young man moved to a distant land in a big city, and he just tried out everything that the world had to offer. And he blew it all. His whole inheritance, he blew it on wild living. But can you picture it? After he's wasted it all, this young man just sitting on the side of the road with nothing but the clothes on his back. And I'm imagining all the emotions, the grief, the surprise, the how in the world do I find myself here? It just seems like a couple weeks ago I had so much, and now I have nothing. And he's sitting there in full of despair. And it says that about the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. So he's out of money, he's out of friends, he's out of food, he's far from family, and he's starving now. He's starving. He can't even make ends meet. He can't even get food on the table. So he persuaded a local farmer to hire him. And the man sent him into his field to feed the pigs. The young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him. But no one gave him anything. In this day and age, this would have been the most humiliating job in the world. I mean, you know what a pigsty smells like because you live in Ohio. And you've driven by them. But in this day and age, it would have been even worse, because to these people, a pig is the most unclean animal. And this guy's at a point where he's got no other option but to take this job. When he sees the pods that the pigs are eating, his mouth begins to salivate because he's so hungry. I imagine times when he's walking from the storehouse out to the trough, when he's carrying the pods in his bucket. Sometimes he's got to look around and see if anybody's watching before he sticks his hand in and puts a little in his mouth, just so that he can get enough nutrition to get through the day. Rock bottom, total emptiness in this guy's life. But he has a moment. When he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, at home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare. And here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I'm no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant. So he's rehearsing this speech in his mind. And so it says in verse 20, he returned home to his father. To the younger son's credit, I know we don't like him so far because he took a third of the inheritance and he went and blew it in the wild living foreign land. I know he's not our favorite character in the story, but to his credit, the humility it takes to get yourself up and begin to walk back home and to face the father. His clothes are filthy. He's lost weight. He's skin and bones. He hasn't shaved. His hair's all messed up. He smells like pigs. And he makes his way home. The humility that it must have taken. Think about how many times you think on that walk home he thought about turning around and saying, forget it. Nobody wants to see me. Forget it. I don't even want to face my older brother, my dad, the servants. I can't go through that exercise. How many times do you think he thought about turning around? But he keeps putting one foot in front of the other. What's going to happen when the Father recognizes him? When he sees him for the first time? The listeners of Jesus have to be hanging on every word. Jesus continues, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. I've got a 5-year-old son. His name's Judah. And if I saw him walking in the distance, because I've seen him walk so many times, I saw him take his first steps. I know Judah's walk. I'll bet you that father looked off in the distance and thought, he's walking like my son. I recognize his gait. He's walking like my son. And it says, filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him and kissed him. The old man hiked up his robe and started running towards his son. In this day and age, a patriarchal father like this never runs. Children run, women might run, but an old man never runs. He would have had to hike up his robe and it would have looked awkward. And he's running towards his son, and it says that he's filled with compassion and love, and he embraces his stinky son. And he starts kissing him because he can't help himself. He's so full of love for his boy. He cannot help himself. And the son tries to give a speech. You know, and you think about it too, we wouldn't blame the father. If you didn't know how this story played out, or if this is the first time you've heard this, we wouldn't blame the father if he kind of stood on the porch and said, this better be good. We wouldn't blame him because it better be good, man. You went and blew it. But instead, we see this picture of a father who can't help himself but to run out and meet his son on the road. I wonder when the son was walking up and when he saw his dad running at him, I wonder if he kind of braced for impact. Because the appropriate response might be for the dad to punch the son in the mouth and knock him out. You wasted it all? This is what you look like? That seems like the more fair response, maybe is the best way to put it. I wonder if the son was nervous, but he just wraps him up and he starts hugging him. And his son, he goes into the speech. He's been practicing it. Father, I've sinned against both heaven and you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But his father said to the servants, it's almost like he cut him off. He's like, just be quiet. Keep your speech to yourself. His father said to the servants, quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet. Get him the best robe in the house. It was probably his robe. It was probably his robe hanging in his closet. Go get my robe. The family ring, put a ring on his finger. Only sons get to wear the ring. Only sons get to wear sandals in the house. Servants don't get to do that. What the father is saying is, this is my son, and nothing has changed. And my love for him, I can't even contain it. And I've always imagined, I'm like, what is going through the mind of the son at this point? Is he crying? Is he laughing? Is he speechless? You know when the mice are dressing up Cinderella and she's just kind of standing there just looking like this? I just picture the son being like, the ring, the sandals, the coat. I don't know how to handle this. It's been a while since I've enjoyed stuff like this. The inner turmoil, the inner confusion that he's going through. And then, this is maybe my favorite verse of the whole passage. This is what the father says next. Kill the calf we've been fattening. Boys, you know the big one? Big Louie, it's time. Light the grill, you know? He's going, man, the big one. It's time to kill the one that we have been fattening because my son is home. We must celebrate with a feast. For this son of mine was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost and he is found. So the party began. The father comes in and says, turn the music up. Live band. Here's the goggles. We're popping champagne. He can't help himself but dance a little bit. He's got his arm around his boy and he's walking around to all the servants going, he's back. My son is back. And the son is like, what did I do to deserve this? And it doesn't matter because the father won't even let him out of his arms clench because he loves his son so much. He doesn't care what he did. He's just glad that he's home. And so the party began. Man, Jesus told some amazing stories. And like I said, this story isn't true, but it is true in a sense that it represents things that are true. And when Jesus would tell stories, he would invite people to find themselves in the story. And so I just wonder where you see yourself in the story. And I came up with a couple ideas, and I'm going to throw them out there and see which one, see where you think you land this morning. The first place that you might find yourself in the story, you might find yourself in the big city, in the distant land. And the reason you find yourself there is because you think this whole thing is made up. You actually don't believe in God. You don't believe in eternal reward or eternal consequences, and so why not enjoy everything the world has to offer? Maybe you find yourself full of all of the resources to try everything that the world has to offer. And because you don't believe in God, you go, I'm just kind of doing what I want. Maybe that's where you find yourself in the story. Maybe you find yourself in the pigsty, where the best way you know how to describe your life or how you feel is empty. And maybe your stomach isn't empty, but it sure feels like your heart is or your life is. And what's confusing to you is that you have everything that you thought would fill you, whether it's a relationship or a house or a family or a job or success or whatever it may be. And in that emptiness, that hole that's deep inside of you isn't full yet, and it's confusing. And you're going, what will fill this? Maybe you find yourself on the road home. Maybe recently you started to pray for the first time in a while, or you've begun to come back to church for the first time in a while. You would describe yourself as spiritually open or spiritually curious, but deep in the back of your mind, you're still wondering how God feels about you. And you're tempted to turn around, because if you keep going, you're going to have to face everything that you've done. And you're kind of excited, like you're making progress, you're taking steps, but you kind of, if you're honest, are wondering if it's going to last or if you're going to maybe just turn back and go back to what you were doing. Maybe, I've been hugging people all morning that are part of our church family, and I know where you're at. This is where you're at. Maybe you find yourself in this story at the feast, enjoying the steak, enjoying the party. You like the music. You're being surrounded by people that love you and people that accept you. And maybe the best way I know how to describe this is that you are totally convinced that there's more love in God than there is sin in you. And that belief has washed over your life, so you don't walk in sin or guilt or shame. No, no, no. You believe in forgiveness and you feel forgiven. And so you actually feel the love of God on your life and you're walking in freedom. And I know there's people in here that feel that way this morning. And then I kind of made one up. I made a fifth spot up because I just think that there's some people that might be here. Do you think the Son would have been tempted while the party was going on to just kind of go upstairs and go and sit in his room because he didn't feel like he deserved the party? Do you feel like it's probable or possible that the Son, because he didn't feel like he deserved it, that he had a hard time enjoying it? And maybe he just tried to sneak off when his Father wasn't looking because he can't really wrap his mind around what he's getting after what he did. And so this fifth spot is back in your old bedroom. And the reason I bring that up is because I talk to people that believe in God, people that are theologically, they believe in the Bible. They would say, God has saved me, God has forgiven me. But, man, I in my role here as a pastor of a church, I get to talk to people about where they're at on their spiritual journey and how they're feeling and how they're relating with God. And so often, I hear people say the right things theologically, like God has forgiven me for my sins, but yet they still live with this underlying sense of guilt or shame that they have to, feel sorry for a while to prove to God that they're really sorry. And I guess maybe the best way to figure out if you're there, if you're in this spot where you're maybe saved, you're home, you're back with the Father, your relationship with Him to some degree has been reconciled, but you're not really enjoying the party that He's throwing for you. Maybe the best way to figure out if you might be there is to answer this question. What do you think God thinks when He thinks about you? Think about that for a second. What do you think God thinks when He thinks about you? And if it isn't, hike up your robe, awkwardly run, give Him a ring, give Him some sandals, give Him a robe, give Him a steak kind of love, then we are greatly misunderstanding the amount of love that God has for us. Because listen, whether we are in the city or in the pigsty or on the road home or at the party or upstairs in our room, unsure if we deserve the party, the bottom line for every single person here, here's what I need everybody to know. This is the takeaway. The party is for you. The party is for every single one of us. And if you're inclined in this moment to go, wow, this is a conversation that I'm going to kind of MC for you and God. You might go, I don't know if I deserve that. God would say, you don't, but I'm throwing it anyways. The party's for you. And if you would say something like, I've made too many mistakes, He goes, I know about all of them. I've forgiven all of them. The party is for you. And if you would say something like, man, it has just been too long, He would say, tell me about it. I've been waiting forever, man. I'm so glad you're back. The party's for you. I guess the calf is bigger than it used to be. We've fattened him up for you. The party is for you. And if you would say something like, if you only knew, God would say to you, oh, I know it all. Nothing would surprise me. I know it all. And the party is for you. The party's for you. The party is for every single one of us. If you find yourself being able to relate the most to being in the big city, here's the message for you. Sooner or later, you will realize that life is better with God. And I hope that you realize that sooner than later. If you are in the pigsty and you feel this emptiness, this hole. Jesus said, He said, I came to give life and give life to the full. In other words, the hole inside of all of us is God-shaped, and there will always be an emptiness until we receive God to fill that hole. If you find yourself, and I know some people in here, I saw you walk in, if you find yourself on the road home, the message to you this morning is to keep walking home. That the Father is not inside at the house pacing mad at you. He's sitting on the front porch staring at the horizon, hoping that the speck of you will show up. Keep coming home. Keep praying. Keep leaning in. Keep going. God is so excited that you're coming home. If you find yourself up in the bedroom, unsure if you deserve this, the message is to come downstairs, that the party's for you. That the steak is for you, that the robe is for you, the ring is for you. And we all know ourselves well enough, and we know our own sin well enough, that it's just hard to accept that. In the American earn-it culture, it's hard to accept free gifts. But the bottom line is that the gospel is a free gift. It is to be received, not earned. You can't earn it. It can only be received. And if you're a Christian and you have come to the party and you've come to the end of yourself and you've received the love of the Father, man, the message to you is simply, man, isn't it good? Isn't Easter the best when we know how much God loves us? Thanks for watching. To find out more about our church, about when and where we meet, about joining a group, about serving on a team, about giving online, you can find all of it at threecreekschurch.com.